the Baen Free Radio Hour.
On the podcast, hurricane breeding ground found where the Coriolis effect allows left and right twisting storms to twist together and churn out baby young'uns. Dragon Prose at DragonCon, plus we continue with the complete audiobook serialization of Son of the Black Sword by Larry Correia, all right now. Welcome to the Baen Free Radio Hour podcast. It's an honor to have you along. I'm Baen Senior Editor Tony Daniel. This time we have a roundtable discussion among the crew of Baen employees who went down to provide the Baen Books presence at this year's DragonCon in Atlanta, Georgia. Now, DragonCon is a big deal science fiction convention with over 75,000 attendees each year that's held down there. What's more, it's a big convention for Baen Books because there's a lot of Baen authors that make it to DragonCon. We often have between 10 and 25 authors there whom we publish, and it's always a great get-together and a great time. Furthermore, Baen has a booth in the big show floor, and we use it for our authors to sign their books. We usually do this in conjunction with a bookseller so that people can buy the books, too. This year, and for the last several years, that bookseller's been the missing volume. Anyway, we sat down with the crew who went down there this year and wined and dined with the authors and met the fans, and put on the Baen Roadshow, and sat on panels and generally showed the Baen colors. The Baen crew this year included Executive Editor Jim Minz, Consulting Editor David Afsharirad, Assistant Editor Christopher Ruocchio, and Editorial Assistant Grace Borger. It's a rollicking discussion of great time, so stay tuned for that. And it even has a little good-humored inside dishing on some of your favorite authors. Plus, we continue with the complete audiobook serialization of Larry Correia's great high fantasy novel, Son of the Black Sword. Now, here's the news. The September Baen e-arcs are here. Now, an e-arc is the path that a major storm system takes when it hears there's a new anthology filled with Baen authors at its favorite bookseller in Tennessee. Why hurricanes shot for books in Tennessee is one of the wonders and mysteries of creation, and we'll never fully fathom it, but we should be glad it isn't somewhere in California. The thing would leave a wake of destruction across the entire United States just to read the next Honor Harrington. No, that's not true at all. An e-arc is an electronic advanced reading copy of a book. These are ebooks that we put on sale several months before the book is printed in order for readers to get to read their favorite authors and favorite series early, maybe with a few typos and infelicities still within the text. First is All the Plagues of Hell by Eric Flint and Dave Freer. Hell breaks loose. Orcusy is loose. The snake god of plague has been awakened by Lucia de Mano. With the venomous magic of Orcusy at her command, Lucia plots to marry and then murder the usurper, who now rules Milan, the condottiere Carlo Sforza, known to friends and foe alike as the Wolf of the North. On his side, Sforza has only the skill and cunning of his physician, Francisco Turner, but will that be enough to save the Wolf of the North? For out there in the countryside of northern Italy, Orcusy is encoiling all the plagues of hell. Also added is A Star-Wheeled Sky by Brad R. Torgerson. Fate of humanity on the interstellar highway. Well over a millennia in the past, men and women fled Earth, escaping Armageddon. What they found, lost in some forgotten corner of the Milky Way, was the Waywork, an alien superhighway system between a closed sphere of stars. Now the 5 star states, which rule all that's left of humanity, are poised on the brink of another terrible war. It's a clash of civilizations as the future of the human race hangs in the balance. And finally out in e-arc is Space Pioneers, an anthology edited by Hank Davis and Christopher Ruocchio. Final Frontiers. Since the dawn of time, humankind has felt the urge to push at the boundaries of our world and discover what lies over the horizon. And since the dawn of science fiction, writers have wondered about the next frontier, the one that lies out there. Here, then, is a generous collection of stories that reach out in the unknown void, finding awe, wonder, other minds, even terror, but always going beyond the world we know to explore a universe strange, beyond the outermost limits of human imagination. Stories of brave men and women who risk all to explore, colonize, and settle the vast reaches of space. Stories by David Drake, Sarah A. Hoyt, Paul Anderson, Christopher Ruocchio, and there's even one by me, Tony Daniel. It was first published back in Asimov's in the late 90s, and it's one of my favorite stories I ever wrote, so check that out, Space Pioneers. All the Plagues of Hell by Eric Flint and Dave Freer, A Star-Wheeled Sky by Brad Torgerson, and Space Pioneers, edited by Hank Davis and Christopher Ruocchio, all in eARC form, all ebooks that you can read now. They're available exclusively at Baen eBooks. Go to Baen.com and you can get them. Want to welcome Jim Minz, Grace Borger, Christopher Ruocchio, and David Afsharirad to the podcast. How's it going?
Oh, not so bad.
Yeah, everything's fine.
Woo! Here comes the hurricane.
Yes, that's right. Hurricane Florence is barreling in as we record this. By the time
the show must go on.
That's true. We may be gone when this posts, actually.
All dead.
We'll see. Let's see how it goes. These are... This is sort of the Baen crew, and this is the folk that went to DragonCon. That's what we want to talk about today. Jim Minz is Baen Executive Editor, I think is his title now. Grace is, I guess we should probably call it our Editorial Assistant or something like that.
Amen.
Instead of Mail Clerk, because she's been through the fires now.
Of course, at Baen, it's never instead of, it's in addition to. There's always more work to be had for everyone.
Mail is just one of the many things now. And Christopher is assistant editor.
Assistant editor.
Excellent. And
Semantic
David is, what are you, consulting editor or something like that, David?
I don't. Yeah.
Yes, that's it.
That's okay.
I say you are, and I think Tony says you are too, so therefore it is.
You have been dubbed.
So that's great.
Okay. Well, so I guess maybe, Jim, why is DragonCon such a huge Baen deal every year? What's the deal? Why? It seems like that we begin preparing for it the moment everyone gets back.
Well, it helps that we're all scrambling to get hotel rooms as soon as it wraps up. But part of the reason why it's such a big Baen deal is because it's such a big deal to the science fiction field. There's tons of small conventions going on all over the place, including, say, the World Science Fiction Convention, whereas DragonCon's about 70,000, 80,000 people getting together, having a good time, and it's got everything. It's got live music round the clock. It's got drum circles round the clock. It's got a huckster's room that's as big as most Comic-Cons. It's got a ton of great programming and science fiction literature, science fiction shows, science fiction media. It's got comics. It's got artists. It's got it all. And the best part about it, Comic-Cons are perfectly fine as media shows that can be a wonderful chance to interact with folks. DragonCon is Mardi Gras for us. It's Mardi Gras for the science fiction world. We get together and have a good time. And, well, we want to be a part of that.
Yeah, it is comparable in size to the biggest Comic-Cons, right?
It's a little bit smaller. I think San Diego's
it's only about half in terms of attendance as compared to San Diego, which caps out, I think, at about 150. But it is, all those are run more as trade shows at a giant convention center. People shuffle through, and while there is a social scene, it isn't nearly as condensed because most of DragonCon happens in the 5, 6 main hotels where that's where all the programming is. That's where the concerts are. The Huckster's Room, while it's busy with thousands of people shuffling through, is actually a side note off to one end of the convention where most of the happenings are elsewhere, and the big ballrooms spread throughout all the different hotels.
It's a social thing, and it's a science fiction thing that's just for us, our genre. And the other thing is in the Southeast. And many of our writers are located in driving distance. So, who did you meet, Grace? At the so you've been doing the mail clerk duties for a while, and your other stuff that you've now taken on, and you have been sending out things to a lot of our writers who you've never set eyes on before, but you now have laid eyes on many of them. So,
Yes.
what was your list of folk?
There honestly were so many. I don't know that I remember all of them.
We met Weber.
I did meet Weber. I met Larry Correia. I met Tim Powers. I met...
What about DJ Butler? Did you meet him?
Yeah, I met DJ Butler, and he was really great. I met Mike Williamson. I met Dr. Gannon. I met Timothy Zahn. I met Jody Lynn Nye. I met so many others. I'm trying to remember. It's such a long weekend.
Did you meet Ringo? Did you say?
I did meet Ringo. I can't believe I forgot Ringo, but I did meet him, and so many other people. Yeah. I will probably think of them later.
It's probably easier to ask. It's probably easier to ask who wasn't there, although maybe it's not quite the same as LibertyCon, but we had at least a couple dozen authors, all told, counting people who write short fiction and anthologies and all the rest.
Yeah. And although we found that you are a geek and have geek tastes, which we didn't know of when we hired you. Yet you're not really from the science fiction world. What was it like to suddenly be plunged into that milieu?
Honestly, it was, in a sense, it wasn't what I was expecting, because I hadn't been to any convention before, and so I didn't exactly know what was going to be going on, but I did get prepped beforehand. Everybody told me, this is a huge event, it's a big deal, lots of people there, it's great. So honestly, it was a lot of fun, and I had a great time. And
What'd you think of the costumes?
The costumes were great, honestly. So many people with so many different inventive ideas on how to make up the same costume. I saw so many different versions of Darth Vader or Deadpool, and everybody just kind of, you can tell they all care a lot about what they're doing and their costumes, and everybody puts a lot of effort into it. And it was honestly really neat to see all the different costumes, the different characters, and how much you could tell everybody really appreciated and cared about what they were doing. And it really just felt like a huge family, which was a lot of fun.
Cool. So one of the things that we do there is we have the Baen booth. And so, Christopher, you and David are now old hands at this. What is this? What do you do? How does it, and Jim, basically starts planning the moment his feet come back.
He's hard at work right now at this table.
What do you do? What does it mean to run that booth? And how is what is this, your third, fourth time to go?
This is my third year.
So yeah.
The booth really is about reaching out to people who are already our readers. I think is our primary function. We host signings at the booth. There are, old readers from the Baen bar on the website and other things will come around, and just dedicated readers in general will come by. The first thing that starts happening Friday morning when the dealer's room opens is some of the same old faces will filter by, and they'll come and get our signing schedule for the weekend, because we'll do at least 3-4 signings a day at the booth, maybe 5, and some of those with multiple authors. And so they'll want to come and update their book signings on their collections, for their collections. And so we do a lot of that, but we also are trying to reach out to new readers, of course, because there are thousands of people moving on by all day, and many of them may not even be great readers, or big readers, rather. They may not have any idea who we are or have heard of very many of our authors. And so what we try to do is pitch them on our free library, which, for any of you listening who may not know what that is, on our website we offer at least a few dozen ebooks completely free, usually the beginnings of some of our bigger series, so that you can find new authors you might like and get into something that you hadn't heard of before.
So you're giving out drugs, basically.
I get that joke every time I talk about the free library on Twitter, and I've heard it 1,000 times. But yeah, it's the same model, right? The first taste is free sort of thing. But they're...
So what was the weirdest dang thing that happened in the booth, in booth land? You could reach back to other years if you want to as well.
Oh, well, my favorite booth story was from last year. we had some guy we thought walk off with a bunch of Larry Correia's books from his signing without paying, and Larry was first cotton onto this, and he grabbed me and was like, "Hey, Chris, I think this guy just walked off with a bunch of books." And we were there. I was there talking to Alistair Kimball, who is one of Eric Flint's co-writers, and in his day job, Alistair is he's an FBI agent, and I was like, Alistair, could you do anything about this? And he was like, say no more, and vanished into the crowd, and I kid you not, 5 minutes later, he comes back with the guy, frog marching him, holding him by the arm, and he has all the books. He's like, this is the one you were looking for? How he pulled him out of this crowd, because there were literally hundreds of people jammed into these aisles, I do not know. I had no idea who we were even looking for, but he came right back with him, and we sorted it all out. It turned out he had paid, but he'd paid way earlier, and we just lost track and everything. It was like, how did you get him? And he's like, oh, that was easy. And then he pulls his blazer aside, and he's got his handcuffs and his badge right there, and he's like, I'm always ready. And it was the most Baen thing, because so many of our authors are veterans or still in the military, or we have a very specific set of skills.
Yeah, protector sorts, guardian sorts often.
And
where they come from.
So I have sicked an FBI agent on a book thief.
Well, that's pretty cool. So you spent some of the time there at Bard's Tower hawking your new book. What is your new book, and how did that go?
Well, I've got two faces, right? When I'm not assistant editor here at Baen, I am a novelist over with Daw Books, which is a long story. I ended up selling the book the same week I got my job here, which was not a bad week. And so my first book's called Empire of Silence. It's a space opera novel, sort of in the vein of Dune or Star Wars. And it's set in the far future, and it's the story of this nobleman who runs away from home and then finds himself stuck in the middle of a war between human beings and the first aliens who have ever stood up to us in thousands of years. And he'll tell you, page 1, he's the person who ended that war, and the story is sort of a memoir. It's why and how. And so I was working, like you said, up with Bard's Tower, which is another bookstore booth that we work with sometimes. Or if you ask its owner, Alexi will tell you that it's not a bookstore, it's a literary celebrity experience. And what we do is we try to offer, this is my bad Alexi impression, we try to offer...
Good.
Not too bad.
It's got like an insane Brooklyn accent, right?
No, I don't know. I don't think it's a Brooklyn accent. But he tries to offer fans their an opportunity to interact with authors directly. So rather than just have the books on shelves like in your normal bookstore, the books are out on a table near the aisle, and the authors will try and directly engage with people passing by and hawk their own books or their friends' books if they're working side by side. So I would hang out with DJ Butler, wrote Witchy Eye. We're pretty good friends, and we would try to cross-sell one another's books, because it's a lot easier to talk up someone else's book than yours, because you don't look conceited that way. And so it was really fun. So I was there with writers like Kevin J. Anderson was there, which is cool for me because I was a big Star Wars fan growing up, and Kevin's books were some of the first books I ever read as a kid. So it's
Uncharted won the Dragon.
Yeah, and Uncharted
Sarah Hoyt's book.
with Sarah Hoyt won the Dragon this year. David Weber's Call to Vengeance also won a Dragon Award. So we got two here at Baen.
And we scored 5 authors in the process, because with the David Weber, it's the one he co-authored with Timothy Zahn and Tom Pope from View 9. So there's 3 authors on that third book in the Manticore Ascendant series, Call to Vengeance, and then, of course, Uncharted, which is the first novel in a new projected shared world series written by Kevin Anderson and Sarah Hoyt. So, yeah, 2 books, 5 authors, no waiting.
That's cool. And immediately got that on the tip sheet, which feeds out to Amazon, so you should see that. So, David, you also have done your time at Bard's Tower, hawking the Year's Best anthology that you edit, the Year's Best Military and Adventure SF. And tell us a little bit about the the Reader Award and what you do at DragonCon every year with that.
Yeah, so this is sort of my, not that I need an excuse, but my reason for being there, aside from helping out with all the other Baen stuff at the booth and being on panels and such, is, so as you said, I've edited Year's Best this is the 4th year, and part of what we did is we wanted to, with the book, as we've talked about on this podcast, we wanted to kind of find a way to engage the readers a little bit more, and then also to kind of honor the author, specific author in the book. And so what we came up with was the Year's Best Military and Adventure SF Reader's Choice Award. And what that is the table of contents. The book is essentially the ballot, and readers can go on to Baen.com/Year's Best Award every year and vote for their favorite story. And we tally those up, and we give out an award at the Baen Traveling Roadshow, which is where at Baen, at DragonCon, it's our big sort of what's the word I'm looking for? Center showcase for all of our upcoming books and new cover art and exciting things like that. And what I get to do is stand up in front of a room of Baen fans and announce who won the Reader's Choice Award. And the author gets a plaque, and we also give them $500 in cash. And it's always been a lot of fun to do. The first year, Mike Williamson won. David Drake won the second year, and the third year was Sharon Lee and Steve Miller. And then this year was really exciting, which was that Casey Azell won for her story, Family Over Blood. And it was fun because she's a newer writer, and she's someone that I keep hearing people say she's someone to watch out for, and I agree. And she was also there, and it's always nice to have the person there to hand them the stuff. So it was a lot of fun, and we also announced that we're doing Volume 5 next year. So if readers haven't had a chance to vote these last 4 years, they can pick up Volume 5, and we will be doing it again. So.
Yeah. Give a little background on Casey. We actually published her first story in the anthology Citizens a few years back, and she's had stories in a number of other Baen anthologies, and in fact, she's the co-anthologist with Larry Correia for next year's Noir Fatale, and she's also one of those members of the Been There, Done That Club, having been a helicopter pilot for the U.S. Air Force. So, yeah, you'll definitely be hearing more from Casey because she's got the writer chops, and she's got the right life experience that seems to work pretty well when it comes to military science fiction and other adventure stories.
I think it's Captain Casey.
It is correct.
Major.
That's right.
So Jim, a lot of what goes on other than the booth is people going to panels and programming and such. You are on panels as an eminence occasionally. What is that like? Is it different than other conventions, or is it the same sort of thing, or is it?
What I love about DragonCon is, given its size and how many people show up for the concerts and the big media personalities that come every year from the major shows and major movies and all that, it'd be really easy for them to pretty much ignore literature, but they don't. They have multiple tracks about literature. There's a fantasy literature track, science fiction literature track, the time travel track, the military science fiction track. There are literally over a dozen tracks that deal with books, which is great. And I'm on, a number of program items, and in many ways it is like other conventions, the difference being that there are a ton of great authors there, not even just the Baen ones. We have authors from across the scope, publishers from, almost every science fiction house. There are authors from any of those there. Programming is usually very smartly run, put together well, and you have packed rooms. I mean, it's a kind of panel where, depending on the convention, you may only have 12 to 20 to 30, 40 people. At DragonCon, you're going to have 100 plus, maybe even 200, depending on the room and what the track is. And that's something that's going on deep in the bowels of the Hyatt, 2 floors below where the concerts are, where if you don't know about it, you might not even be aware, and yet it's still probably one of the best attended science fiction literature conventions in the country, even if you ignore all the mainstream stuff. and all the media stuff and all the other stuff going on in all the other ballrooms and all the other hotels. Just what's going on in that Hyatt basement with what's just for the science fiction convention, the books. It outstrips almost any convention I can think of.
Did you do a panel?
Yeah, I was on two.
Cool. What were the panels?
I did one on changes in publishing. Jim was on that too, actually. We were representing not changing because we were the traditional publisher guys. Everyone else was indie, self-pub. So that was interesting. And I did one about genre distinctions in fantasy, which I got in some trouble on because I said that hard magic is not magic, which is very contentious. There was some audibly indrawn breaths when I said that. You hear the sharpening of knives.
I will say this: I do love the delicious irony of Baen being painted as traditional. While we play with the big boys and work in the traditional environment, obviously with our ebooks and such, we've kind of been ahead of the curve for 15 plus years now. And yet, indeed, at that panel with what's going on with self-publishing, we are the old stodgies.
We're the old stodgies who insist that books actually make money, and that they have readers.
And editing and
editing and all that stuff.
Although representing the
Crazy
small
old
press who
fashions.
came out of independence, there was Chris Kennedy, and he certainly knows his stuff. Started as a self-pub, made his mistakes just like everybody does, but learned from them. And these days is his own publishing imprint, which you can find available on BaenEbooks.com.
That's right. We distribute him
because he's one of those guys, the cream that rises from the.
That's right. Well, we distribute many small presses that have figured out how to do it right. So what about the social stuff that's going on outside of all this hawking and
one of the great things about DragonCon, there is so much stuff going on. Of course, one of the biggest mistakes I ever made about 7 years ago when I said to Tony, we really should have a booth. And, well, now we have a booth, so I don't get to go out and have as much fun at late night as I usually do because we have a lot more responsibilities. Although this year I had a distinct pleasure of being invited backstage for the Cruise Shadows concert. Shout out to Brent and Rogue. Thank you so much for a great night. Now that I'm north of 50, staying up for a concert that starts at 1 a.m. isn't nearly as common as it was, say, a decade ago. It was a lot of fun to do that, and luckily it was a day I could actually sleep till 10 afterwards. So getting to bed at 4:30 didn't kill me quite as much as it used to. Yeah. But yeah, there's so much going on. I mean, like I said, the Cruise Shadows concert, one of the key concerts, one of the best attended concerts, and it starts at 1 a.m. And right next door is the drum circle that doesn't stop. And right below that there's always stuff going on. Even Grace, who as a newbie to the convention, lent a hand helping out with the staff volunteering as well, providing hospitality. And maybe she has a few things to say about that.
And there's the Baen Bar folks that are that are there. Did they have a specific suite this time?
Yeah, they did. Although this year, instead of just calling it Barfly Central, and for those of you who don't know that term, Baen's Bar, which of course has been an online discussion board that may or may not date back to the ARPANET. I cannot confirm that. But that being said, we've had a very active online group of fans for decades. And some of those fans have had a suite for a long time. They open up for hospitality. Although this year it was called Speaker's Speakeasy. Part of that is because Speaker to Lab Animals, a.k.a. Rob Hansen, a.k.a. Ted Roberts, whose nonfiction and fiction have been found on the Baen website and in Baen anthologies. But these days he's also being published by other publishers with some of his fiction. And so they went with the name Speaker Speakeasy just because they were also doing something with Chris Kennedy and the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse. Although, that's still selling books through BaenEbooks.com. We're perfectly fine with that as well. And, yeah, they have that open for our hardcore fans who come to the convention and get a chance to hang out. I mean, last year, one of the true highlights for me was spending 4 hours in Barfly Central chatting with Jerry Purnell, which,
a lot of the Baen writers go by Barfly.
Yeah, a bunch of them, and not just Baen writers. That's where I've seen Lorica Hamilton up there on more than one occasion, and others. I mean, it's one of those places where you can go and relax and just hang out. They do try and keep it on the down low. You need to know the right people to get it. It's not just an open party, but if you listen to this podcast, you probably know some of the people that run this, or at least can track them down.
If you get on the if you get
on Baen's
the
bar,
discussion
yeah,
board,
get on the
you'll
discussion
find out
board.
what
You can
is-
find out all about it.
And it's certainly something that if you're going to go to DragonCon next year, you could easily find out where the
Absolutely.
the bar
If you go on the night of the kilts and corsets, be sure you're wearing a kilt or corset. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Or both.
But please wear underwear. So, what else? What else was? We should probably talk about the parade. I don't know if any of y'all went this time.
I was working.
I was working at
Everybody's
the booth during the
working.
parade.
But there is a giant parade through downtown Atlanta of all the costumes.
Saturday morning they shut down downtown Atlanta. They have almost 250,000 people show up for this, and it's a bunch of amazing costumes. I didn't go this year. In order to get a seat and get a view, you need to get out there early.
Yeah, you got to.
In years past, we actually did for our 30th anniversary. We did. We had an entry in the parade, the cosplayers of Baen, and people dressing up from the Black Tide Rising universe, from the Honor Harrington universe, from it wasn't the Imperium. It was one of other Jodie Lynn Nye's older fantasy series that's escaping me, and a few others. And we had about 30 cosplayers, and we actually marched in the parade. And I'll tell you, that was a great way to experience it because you got to see just the throngs of people. I mean, these are, plenty of those folks probably aren't what you consider hardcore SF fans, but they shut down downtown Atlanta for us to get our geek on. It's kind of amazing.
If people in Atlanta just come to this.
Yeah, people just come to the parade. Indeed, a lot of the attendees of DragonCon try and avoid the parade because it's actually too crazy and too crowded. In my case, I actually had programming, although at least this year it wasn't programming that was actually on the other side of the parade route. I've had many an adventure trying to get around the parade to get to a program lined up.
Yeah, it's really fun especially for kids.
Yeah, the costuming is amazing. Sure. It really is.
If you want to bring some snacks
and water.
Yeah.
Tony, I just think, kind of piggybacking on that kind of comment, people who haven't been to DragonCon, or something comparable, it's just crazy. If you picture those scenes in like a movie where you see like downtown Manhattan and everybody's packed and they're commuting and you're shoulder to shoulder walking, it's like that in Atlanta, only 3/4 of the people are dressed up like Star Trek or Star Wars or Pokemon characters, right? It's like you dropped into an alternate universe. It's a lot of fun, and it's very weird in a good way. So, yeah.
Well, one of the other things that we get to do at conventions, especially this one, is go out and eat with the writers. So you guys did some of that. What was who'd you hang out with? Grace and David and Christopher and Jim. Jim hung out with everyone because that's what Jim does. But,
so my favorite story of this I think maybe my favorite DragonCon story period is I'm a big into tiki stuff, and so I always try to get us to go to Trader Vic's as a group, usually on Thursday. And so we had a group there. I think we were supposed to have 8, but we squeezed 10 people in. And Dave Butler was there, Jim was there, everyone on this besides you, Tony, podcast was there. Yeah. Griffin Barber.
Well, I went to it with you when I was there last year.
Yeah, you've definitely been. I just mean this time.
Yeah.
But so we were all sitting around the table and we're talking about various things, and somehow we got on the topic of religion, which you're typically not supposed to talk about at the dinner table because it's so contentious, and you don't want people to fight. And everyone's just talking about it so calmly, and we've got a Mormon, some lapsed Catholics, some atheists, Lutheran, non-denominational. We didn't have any, and everyone's very calm discussing this. Okay, we didn't really debate much, just sort of talked about our backgrounds and stuff. And then the conversation moves on, completely civil. And then someone brings up Star Wars. Someone says, I kind of like The Last Jedi.
And I killed them.
And not later.
That's the real religion. Okay.
We had to we had to forcibly shut the conversation down because it was getting so heated that we couldn't talk about it politely.
Sectarian
Maybe
violence.
gives you a feel for the kind of things that go on at DragonCon.
Yeah, Aaron Michael Ritchie's dead now.
There's faith, and then there's belief.
He's okay. Aaron's a good guy, but he is dead now.
So one of the big things that we do is we take out all the writers to a gigantic get-together. What was that, Jim? Where was that? Who was
a few years ago, we managed to convince Pity Pat's Porch, which is located right across the street from the Westin Hotel and right next to America's Mart where the dealer's room is, to open up just a little bit early so that we can do a big brunch for all our people who are attending the con. And by all our people, I believe, what was our final number on head count? 40-something?
48, I think.
48, and I think a couple extras showed up, actually.
It was about 50.
So we had almost 50 people show up for brunch. And Pity Pat's Porch is this wonderful place that does good old down-home southern cooking. I look forward to the blackened catfish every year. They also have all sorts of good stuff set up for us, and it's just plain old southern hospitality. We used to do it in one of the hotel restaurants. We bounced around to different hotel restaurants, but man, big shout out to Pity Pat's Porch. They're really great for lunch and dinner, and they do a great job of taking care of us. And we have all the peoples, all our authors. We invite any of the artists that are free, spouses, of course, and even people who are just contributing to anthologies at the moment. People like Casey Azell and others, Chris Smith, who you'll see those names popping up on novels in the upcoming years, but right now are just short story writers for us. And we just have a good time. Spend a few hours having great food and great conversation. I got a chance to sit down and chat with Larry Niven, John Ringo, and Larry Correia about politics, which was always a good time.
Pretty cool. So one of the things that I always notice about, and Grace, maybe you can comment on this, is that it's an expedition to go because our editorial offices are close enough that we drive, but it's like sort of like going on safari. And Jim is making sure that everything is packed very correct. I don't know, man. It's like this engineering background he has or something that comes out.
It's Tetris. But hold on, are you saying safari? Are you saying that science fiction fans are animals, Tony?
It is the Wild Kingdom.
Just the ones that think that the Last Jedi.
I think Wild Kingdom's a fair cops, definitely.
Yeah. So what is it like to get ready to go and maybe to come back? But
there, as you've said, there's a lot involved in it. We've got to make sure we have the right promotional material, and if we don't have it, we have to have things made. We have to gather it all up, and we've already got books and we've got things in the office, so we have to make sure we have a dedicated spot for all of the DragonCon material that we're bringing. And then we kind of get it together, and Jim gets the van, and he is much better packing than I am. So I'm in charge of getting it together, boxing it up, and making sure it's labeled. And Jim's in charge of loading it into the van because I would be hopeless at that. But it's definitely a learning experience because sometimes you forget one or two things that you don't think are a huge deal, but then you realize, oh, well, I probably needed a few pens if we're going to be having authors signing books. So it's a learning experience. And
it seems like a van full of promo material that people have to find a place in somehow. It's like you're living in the ecosystem of the promo material.
Yeah, just a bit. The back of the van was kind of full, although I didn't go last year, but I heard that it was much better ride than last year.
Yeah, the good news was that we get the big old passenger van, and we got an old school passenger van. And I'm not saying we did remove those seats because I believe our rental agreement says we should not do that. But we seemed to have a lot more elbow room because we weren't trying to pack in every little inch of space around seats that may or may not have been in the van, which made our life a lot easier.
We should also mention, I just thought of it, that Gray Reinhardt also went down with us. He is our Slush Master General, and he's always a filking at conventions. He's a well-known filker. If you don't know what filking is, check out some of the previous podcasts that Gray has hosted.
If I hadn't had the good fortune of being backstage at the Cruise Shadows concert, the undoubtable highlight for me would have been watching Gray up on stage with Peter Beagle. And I actually got to listen to Peter Beagle sing Innkeeper's Song, inspired by my favorite novel of his, Innkeeper's Song. And that was a very, very special, and that was something I knew nothing about, but happened to be with Gray from, I don't even know, we were on some program item together or ran into each other outside programming, and I asked him where he was off to. He was like, oh, I'm going to be singing with Peter Beagle. I'm like, well, I'm supposed to be meeting somebody in 20 minutes, but I'm going to text them and tell them I'm going to be late. And that was very special. Gray, who not only, of course, is Celeste Master General, also a writer in his own right, and is, of course, a terrific filker, and you can find his stuff out there. He's done a number of songs for us. He actually did an amazing song that opened up LibertyCon's convention this year. There's a great Monster Hunter International song. There's a song about Baen books. There's also, I think, one of my favorite songs of his, which is actually Finding Serenity, a Firefly song. Man, you can find his music out there. It's definitely recommended.
We featured every one of the songs on his last CD on the podcast over the course of. So what else should we talk about DragonCon that is that I haven't covered yet? David, do you have any?
No, not particularly. I will say, you were talking about meeting authors, and I'm still new enough to this, and I think, Christopher, I can speak for you, that although I try to keep my sense of decorum, I'm still getting kind of excited, meeting some of these people who I've always enjoyed reading. And I think, hands down, to me, it seemed like everybody that I talked to on the Baen side was most thrilled to get to actually meet Tim Powers because, one, we all love his stuff, but then also because he's new to Baen. And so, obviously I've known Mike Williamson and Don Ringo and for quite some time going to DragonCon. So, seeing them again is great. But, Tim Powers was new to most of us, so we were all kind of, getting a little excited there. I know Dave Butler was also pretty thrilled to get to meet Tim. So, I just want to put in a plug for Powers because we do have his books coming out. He's new to the Baen family, and so it was exciting to get to sit down and talk with him a little bit. So.
And just to put that in perspective, I'm a huge Tim Powers fan, and I got to say he is one of the most important fantasists of the 20th, 21st century, the latter half of the 20th century. And if you haven't read his work, well, luckily you can find it now from Baen. I definitely recommend start with his collection because it just can't go wrong. And there's so many great short stories in there. Down and Out from Purgatory.
Down and Out in Purgatory, the collected stories of Tim Powers.
And then we've got a new novel from him, bringing out some of his classics that I may have worked on back in the 90s, loosely when I worked for Tor, Expiration Date, and Earthquake Weather. And like I said, Gene Wolfe, these are some of the most important fantasists that have been writing for the last 3, 4, well, in Gene's case, 6 decades. Yeah. And people that you absolutely should be reading.
The collection is now nominated for the World Fantasy Award for the upcoming year, and he's the previous winner of 2 other World Fantasy Awards, so this will be his 3rd if the collection wins. So it's cool.
I will definitely be going back next year.
Are you going to bring your husband, who has no idea?
Jim says yes. We'll see. We will see. But I did greatly enjoy it, and I got to meet a lot of really neat people. I got to see a lot of really cool costumes and really see the science fiction family coming together as a family, which I really enjoyed. So it definitely left me with a very good impression of conventions, and I will be back next year.
Yeah, we've spoiled her now. She's not going to really. She's going to get to one of these smaller regional conventions and see 800, 1,000 people and say, "That's it."
and it's really apart from LibertyCon, which has a whole bunch of Baen writers,
even more surprisingly.
DragonCon is a place where you can sort of see this family of writers that we Baen has drawn together, and that often draw on each other. For inspiration and friendship as they and some of them just are co-writing with each other.
I believe the number this year at the Baen reception at LibertyCon was 12% of the convention. because we just had that many folks there who work with Baen or artists and all the rest.
Oh, did anybody go to the Dragon Awards? Did we?
I had programming opposite, so I didn't.
No, I
get to it.
had programming
Did you
too.
see anybody see the statue?
Yeah, I did.
I
I saw Kevin Anderson's Dragon Award up when I was working at WordFire, which you've never seen the Dragon Award. It's this cool sort of blown glass thing that looks like a flame, maybe about 10 inches high, weighs about half a ton, and Kevin was up there showing it off. He was really excited about it. It's really one of the best looking awards in science fiction, fantasy, dumb. They're really cool looking. So he was up there taking pictures with it and his fans and stuff.
Yeah, they're designed, and they're not just like ordered out of a trophy shop catalog. They're really pretty.
Or hacked together from car parts.
Yeah, or something you bought at Target and put a plaque on. So, yeah. Which we would never do with our Reader's Choice Award for the year's best, but the $500 goes a long way to making whatever the plaque looks like look really nice, right?
Yeah.
And for the Baen Fantasy Adventure Award,
Plaque.
while it may come out of a catalog, I will point out the name of the trophy is the Excalibur Trophy, so I feel it's justified.
Heck yeah, that's right.
There you go.
Well, ours are beautiful. The Dragon Awards are really special. They look like something that a glass designer kind of came up with. So, David, you seem to come alive at DragonCon. So maybe you could have the last word. I don't know. You are the kind of guy that likes to hang out, go to places like tiki places and order rum drinks and hang out with writers and talk and you got away from your two screaming children that you take care of all the time also, who are wonderful children, I'm sure. But
Yeah. Ouch.
what was your
Free at last.
sort of
free
sum
at
up the
last.
DragonCon experience for yourself at least?
Okay. I don't know. It's just a lot of fun. It would normally be exhausting, but like you said, I've got two little kids, so it's actually sort of a break for me. And I think the big thing to me is, as Jim's pointed out, is there's a lot of media stuff, which is very cool, but they still have kept this core of the literature, and they really care about writers there, and that's great. And the thing to me is, I'm calling in here. I'm not in North Carolina. I'm in Austin, Texas, and there's a great community of writers down here, science fiction writers as well. But like you said, I got two kids, so I don't get to go and hang out and talk shop as much. So it's always invigorating to me to get to go and see these people who are doing the same thing, or as I am, or doing the same thing on a bigger scale that I aspire to. And I always just come away, like Grace said, with this great feeling and just really re-energized to dive in and do and work on stories and work on a novel. And I think that's part of the fun for me, is seeing what other people are doing and getting excited about this and sort of recharging the batteries in a weird way. Though physically your batteries are always very drained after it, but mentally it's always a very exciting experience in that way.
Yeah, and if I could add something, I think that my favorite thing about this convention especially, and LibertyCon to an extent as well, but conventions in general, is that I do get to meet people who are, Baen fans in particular, but fans in general, and they're always really, excited about what it is we do here as a company, and about our authors and the books we put out, and that's always it's really good. It's really nice to see because, great working here, but it's a job sometimes, and meeting people to whom what we do matters so much is really edifying, and I really enjoy meeting those people. And
it's like, when you're in the office, or me sitting in my spare bedroom at home working on something, you can forget how cool this really is.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Seeing that reminds you, yeah, exactly.
For those of you who've never been to DragonCon, I will point out that if there are any rooms still available in the Hyatt, they'll be coming available, I believe, on October 2nd. If you go to the DragonCon website, they'll give you that date. So, and there are plenty of overflow hotels out in the distance. If you want to go to what is essentially Mardi Gras for SF fandom, and that is SF fandom of whether movies, TV, books, costuming, all the flavors of science fiction fandom is available at DragonCon in spades. And if you've never been, boy, are you in for a treat.
And thank you all for sharing with us your experience. And I hope people will come and meet the writers and meet the Baen crew next time. And Christopher Ruocchio, Grace Borger, David Afsharirad, and Jim Minz, thank you so much for talking about DragonCon and the Baen presence there today.
Well, thank you, Tony.
You're welcome.
Yeah, anytime.
Now we continue with the complete audiobook serialization of Son of the Black Sword by Larry Correia, Book 1 in the saga of the Forgotten Warrior. After the War of the Gods, the demons were cast out and fell to the world. Mankind was nearly eradicated by the seemingly unstoppable beasts, until the gods sent the great hero Ram Rowan to save them. He united the tribes, gave them magic, and drove the demons into the sea. But as centuries passed, the descendants of the great hero grew in number and power. They became tyrannical and cruel, and their religion nothing but an excuse for greed. The people rose up, and the surviving royalty and their priests were made casteless, condemned to live as untouchables. The age of law had begun. Ashok Vidal has been chosen by a powerful ancient weapon to be its bearer. He is a protector, a member of an ancient military order of roving law enforcers. No one is more merciless in rooting out those who secretly practice the old ways as Ashok. But Ashok isn't who he thinks he is. And when he finds himself on the wrong side of the law, the consequences lead to rebellion, war, and perhaps transformation. Now here is the latest entry in Larry Correia's Son of the Black Sword.
It is rather impressive, isn't it? He hadn't heard the Lord Protector return. Is Devadas? That boy is too stubborn to die. As determined as he is to make up for his father's failures, it wouldn't surprise me if someday he was given my office. Ashok turned back to the carving. I don't understand this. Of course you wouldn't. This map comes from the time before the demons fell to the world. It was forbidden to speak of the time before the law in anything but the vaguest of terms. The acolytes only learned of it in passing, because it had been a dark and wicked time, so corrupt that it still influenced lawbreakers today. The Age of Kings. Before that even. The houses were tribes back then. Fighting the demons is what forced us to name a king. It wasn't until long after we drove the demons into the sea that we discovered kings could be nearly as bad. We haven't been taught much about those days. Surprisingly, Ratul didn't yell at him for concentrating on frivolous, useless things, and to the Lord Protector anything that wasn't fighting or preparing to fight seemed frivolous. Instead, Ratul joined him beneath the map. In ancient times, man had settled across the whole of the world. We were one of 9 continents. There wasn't one nation like there is now, but hundreds of them. A multitude with different ways, different languages, traditions, different color skins. They even had different laws. They fought wars against each other, traded goods and thoughts, even animals. It was routine for man to travel across the sea in mighty ships. That's illegal. Not to mention stupid, Ashok stated dismissively, even though he was talking to a superior. Not in those days. The oceans were just large bodies of water, nothing more, until there was a war that consumed the heavens, and the demons were defeated by the gods and cast down. Gods? Ashok asked. Advocating the existence of such things was highly illegal. I speak metaphorically, of course. Regardless of where they came from, there was a time before demons and a time after. They fell from the sky and began to destroy everything. Across the entire world, cities burned and men fled before them. They nearly exterminated us, It wasn't until we used the black steel to drive them into the water that the oceans became hell. The demons have owned the sea ever since. Do you know where black steel comes from? Despite spending years with 3 pounds of it riding on his hip, nobody had ever been able to explain it to him. There are only fantastical tales by those deluded enough to worship false gods. Ratul answered, a little too quickly. It was hard to imagine this ancient world of travelling foreigners, and no supreme law to rule them all until it had begun raining demons. And Gruvadal had been forged in those days, and it still remembered them. Ashok would have liked to see what the world had been like, but the memories locked in his sword were limited to battle after battle, and nothing beyond. Ashok could relive every fight of every bearer, but he'd never understand what any of them had been fighting for. What do the fanatics say about the origins? Ratul gave Ashok that heavy-lidded glare, letting Ashok know there would be no good answer to that question. The demons destroyed most of civilization, and what history survived were questionable at best. They're locked away in the capital library now, under the careful eye of the archivist's order. The Age of Kings was based on lies, so the records that passed through their priests' corrupt hands were tainted until everything was twisted to serve their greed. Regardless of where black steel comes from, ever since our victory, man has controlled the land and demons have held the sea. We don't try to cross the water, and they are not allowed to walk upon our land. This arrangement has held for 50 generations. Scanning the dots on the other lands, Ashok tried to take it all in. Some of them cast much larger shadows than Vadal City, and the census said nearly 1 million people lived there. It was hard to imagine a city even bigger. What happened to the people in all those other continents? Who knows? Dead, more than likely. The demons nearly ended us here. Perhaps other nations weren't so lucky. Did they discover magic like we did? Maybe in those other places the demons won, and now those slimy things are the ones living on land. That would be trespassing. They should be punished. Ratul actually appeared amused by that. I admire your commitment, but sadly that's a bit beyond our jurisdiction to enforce, Ashok. For now, Ashok thought to himself. He couldn't abide the idea of anything, demon or human, flouting the law. Regardless, if any foreigners survived like we did, we'll never know. Crossing the sea is impossible, so for all practical matters, we're all that remain. You know this. Mindarin must have covered it in your lessons. Briefly. They didn't waste too much of the Acolytes' precious training time on ancient history. Protectors were focused on enforcing the rules now, not dwelling in the past. How one got to the destination was not nearly as important as maintaining order once there. Myself, I'm a student of these things. I've read everything available about the ancients and sought out the best scholars in the capital to discuss our history. That was a surprise. Normally, Ratul only seemed interested in teaching them how to kill people more efficiently. It was hard to picture him actually enjoying something. I've been fascinated by the subject my entire life. If I'd not been obligated to the order, I might have made a fine archivist. But enough of this. There is one final test for you. Ratul walked away. Ashok hesitated. From the top of the mountain he'd been able to see into the lands of several great houses. At the time, he'd not realized how truly small they really were. Taking one last longing look at the map, Ashok hurried and limped after his instructor. More torches had been lit along the corridor. It led further into the mountain. I'm curious, Ashok. Why did you attempt the test so early? He was required to give only honest answers to his superiors. I don't think I can last another year without my sword. Ratul grunted. Thought so. That didn't answer whether he'd get Angruvidal back yet or not. But it wasn't Ashok's place to question. He would prove himself, or die trying. They entered another, smaller chamber. The room was plain, but the shape of it gave the impression it had once been used for more. There were strangely shaped alcoves all around the interior, empty now, their original purpose a mystery. Ratul gestured toward an altar in the center of the room. Behold, the heart of the mountain. It was so black that it seemed to burn a hole in his vision. The hungry darkness seemed to absorb their torchlight. He had to turn his head a bit so that he could actually see it from the corner of his eye. The heart appeared to be a jagged, twisted mass of metal, the size of a child. It was the biggest piece of black steel Ashok had ever seen, big enough to forge a dozen swords or thousands of valuable fragments. Some people had a sense for magic, and though Ashok had never been naturally gifted in that way, even he could feel the energy radiating from the heart. The metal device twitched. As he watched, it twitched again. It really was beating. This is the Order's greatest weapon, old as your precious Angruvidal, from the time when magic was common. We've kept it for over 1,000 years. This is what makes protectors more than men. When you touch it, you will take part of its power with you for the rest of your days. It will sting you and infect your blood. The influence of the heart will be yours to call upon for the rest of your life. It can make you stronger, hardier, and hone your reactions. With sufficient concentration, you can direct it to empower your senses, but it can only do so much at a time. You will heal faster and even survive wounds that would be fatal to a normal man, but it will not make you immortal. An injury sufficiently devastating will still kill you. It may stay death for a time, but nothing can postpone death forever. Well, nothing legal, at least. I have already been touched by magic. Indeed, for one such as you, the defensive power of the heart combined with the offensive skill bestowed by your ancestor blade, I can only imagine what the Order could accomplish with such a weapon at its disposal. There was no better cause than justice, so Ashok didn't mind the idea of a weapon in its behalf. What if I'm unworthy? Ratul had a laugh like a dog's bark. The Order decides who is worthy, and if you weren't, I'd have had the Guardians toss you off that cliff. Magic can make you tougher, but it can't give you character. That's why our program is so harsh. Flawed acolytes must be weeded out. The heart does not care about birth or honor. I imagine a casteless could take from it if one was clever enough to find his way in here. Only a bearer would think of such a question. Don't worry. It is not like Angruvidal. The heart has no opinions of its own. It was not his place to disagree, but in Ashok's experience, all black steel had ghosts inside of it. Some of them were just louder than others. He peered closer into the burning darkness. There was something wrong with the heart. There was a weakness to it. Lord Protector, you can see magic inside of things, can't you? I have that gift, yes. How much magic is left within the heart? Ratul didn't respond. Ashok looked over to see that the master was scowling. Less than when I first saw it for myself. But enough. When magic was worn too thin, its container would fail. What happens when the heart shatters? The Order will die, Ratul said simply. Ashok moved away from the heart. Then I will not use up any for myself. Save the magic for someone better. I appreciate the sentiment, but that isn't how it works. No, Ashok. This is your final test. To become full-fledged protector, the Order requires this. I'm one of the few who can see magic, which means that when you touch the heart, I will see you for what you truly are. This is necessary for the good of the order and for the sanctity of the law. This is a command? Yes. Ashok nodded, stepped toward the heart of black steel, and placed his hands on it. The world turned to blood.
That was another entry in the complete audiobook serialization of Son of the Black Sword by Larry Correia. And that's it for the podcast. Thanks to Audible.com and to podcast theme composer Ruth Jedkowitz. And the absolute value of a number line that twists through 53 dimensions and has the sign of a negative smiley face on one end and a positive frowny face on the other. Plus thanks and plaudits to Jim Minz, David Afsharirad, Christopher Ruocchio, and Grace Borger. The Baen crew responsible for all things Baen books, including keeping the authors happy and readers coming at DragonCon. Please join us here next time at the hammering heart of science fiction and fantasy. And keep reaching for the stars.